Hello and welcome to another episode of the Change Your Minds podcast. I'm Owen Fitzpatrick, and today we're going to talk about how to change. I'm going to be walking you through some of the most important reasons why, number one, change is difficult. Number two, why it matters so much. And number three, most importantly, I'm going to share with you the most important things that you can do in order to make change work for you, in order for you to change more easily and more quickly. They are my two goals, to help you to change more easily and more quickly. And speaking of things that make things easy and quick, let me tell you about another exciting announcement I have. Tomorrow, on the 21st of November, Tuesday the 21st, I am reopening Changing Minds Monthly. And I'm also, for the very first time, opening, or it's the grand opening because it's officially been out a little bit, but the grand opening of the Changing Minds store. The Changing Minds store has got lots of ridiculously cool, different types of training courses, from communication school to confidence school to sleep school to love school to motivation school, discipline school, focus school, strategy school. I mean, you name it, thinking school, performance school. All of these are the names of different courses that are each of them 2 to 3 hours in length. They run about 6 or 7 modules or so, broken down into bite-sized chunks, bite-sized videos that you can immediately watch and then implement, packed full of really great strategies. And you can get any of them or all of them, but you can get any of them very easily by going to the Changing Minds store. Once again, very excited about this. If you go to owenfitzpatrick.com/store, you will get straight to the Changing Minds store, which should already be open by this stage. But tomorrow we're announcing the grand opening. And as well as that, as of tomorrow, Tuesday, the 21st of November, we're going to be relaunching the Changing Minds Monthly membership. This is a membership unique, where every single month I go live on Facebook for 90 minutes, delivering a training to all my members on some area of personal development. This could be around how to stop spiraling, how to care less about what people think, how to develop unstoppable confidence and become able to tackle any challenges that come your way, to become more resilient and anti-fragile, to improve your relationship, to have better conversations with people, to organize your life more successfully. You get the picture, right? So we really have covered the gambit. And I have some ridiculously exciting announcements of very cool bonuses and all sorts of wonderful things that you can get if you decide to come and join us. So to join us, go to owenfitzpatrick.com/CMM. That's Changing Minds Monthly, CMM. So owenfitzpatrick.com/CMM. And as of tomorrow, you'll be able to join us. Now, the good news is the doors will stay open this time for Changing Minds Monthly. However, the price will go up significantly as of a week from tomorrow. So a week from tomorrow, we will be reopening the price to the highest it's been. So if you do want to get in at a ridiculously low rate, your chance is over the next week. That's all my marketing and sales done. I might touch on it again, but I'm excited about it. And I really do think if you enjoy the podcast, you will love the membership. Speaking of the podcast, let us actually get to tackle this topic of change. First of all, let's talk about what makes change so hard. Well, there's a few reasons why change is so hard. The first reason is the fear of failure, obviously. We are scared of change because change is risky. Change could come along and stop us from doing what it is that was coming quite natural to us. So you're doing something, it's all going well. When things change, now all of a sudden you're in a more precarious position. Now all of a sudden you can make mistakes, you can fail. And that can be scary for a lot of people. Also, it's the comfort zone that makes it to the point where we resist change so much. We like doing what's comfortable, what's easy, what's effortless. And of course, change turns things on their head and makes whatever we were doing seem a lot more difficult as a result of the change that is coming fast at us. Also, we can be fearful of success. We can look at success or think about success and think to ourselves, well, if I'm successful, and if I experience that sort of change, then that brings with it a lot more responsibility, a lot more pressure. So do I really want to succeed? Or maybe your belief is that you can't succeed. Maybe you believe you can't change. Maybe you believe that's not possible for you. And that could be the very thing that limits you or gets in your way. Your belief might hold you back itself. Then there's also the lack of discipline. You might be motivated, at least at the beginning of making the change, but along the way, you fall back into old patterns. Why? Because you weren't always motivated. And as a result of that, you just let yourself slip back into old habits. The whole saying, old habits die hard. And maybe you never had enough motivation in the first place. So maybe you haven't really stopped and thought to yourself that change is worth it, that you're thinking through that I really need to do this. And maybe it's not even a case of motivation or lack of motivation. Maybe it's a case of not prioritizing the specific change. I mean, how many things in your life do you want to change? And then how many things are you actively trying to change? And when you make a very quick sum between what you want to change and what you're actually acting towards changing, you'll realize there's plenty of things that we want to change, but we never get around to it. Not just because we're not motivated, we could be motivated, but something else is a priority over it. And we can only give so much of our attention, so much of our energy, so much of our time to one particular effort. Or we can only give a certain amount of effort, a certain amount of time, a certain amount of energy to one big change. So with all of those things holding us back, the question then is, well, why should we bother change? Why should we bother pursuing difference? Why should we bother trying to alter what it is that we're doing and what's going on for us? Well, the first thing to say is that we no longer have a choice. The world is now turbulent more than it's ever been before. It's volatile. Things are changing at a rapid rate. If you can't adapt, you're in big trouble. And so staying as you were, doing what you were doing is risky. We talk about change being risky, but the real risk and the real thing that might lead to failure is staying stagnant in the same way you've been doing things all the time up till now. If you find yourself resistant to change, that risk is something you have to recognize that you're taking. It's also important to recognize that the status quo itself is uncomfortable. It might be comfortable in the sense that you're used to it, but knowing what's around the corner and knowing that the world is changing around us means that the status quo or the status quo that we're experiencing is more uncomfortable than ever, because at any moment, everything can be taken away. At any moment, the rug can be pulled from beneath us. And it's important for us to recognize that. The next thing to realize is that having more responsibility leads to more control or more influence. So rather than being scared of success because, oh, if I change and if I become more successful, that will lead to more responsibility. Well, responsibility can be great because that can give you the control or influence that you need in order for you to be able to organize your life more effectively. And that's what we're looking to do. The more that you realize responsibility can lead to control, the more able you'll be to overcome this fear of success and therefore be more comfortable with change. The next thing to realize is that this notion of I can't change, well, the fact of the matter is that you have changed and you do change and you are changing. You're constantly changing. We are in a world where we're forced to continuously change. And if you look at who you are right now and you ask yourself the question, who was I 5 years ago? My guess is you are someone quite different. And even if you feel that you were relatively similar, I can promise you there's a lot of things in your life, in your family life, in your business life, in your friendships that has changed over the past few years. So change is inevitable. Not about I can't change or I'm not able to change. Well, you already are changing. The only question is in what direction. Change itself is not always going to be worth it. But when you decide what changes you're going to make, that's when you make change worth it. And that's what we really have to recognize, is that in order for you to be able to motivate yourself successfully, you need to start to see whatever change that you're making as being something important. It needs to be important enough. It needs a strong why that drives your behavior forward. So when the going gets tough, you keep executing on the new way of doing things, on the new way of thinking, on the new way of acting. So you're training yourself to value whatever change you're making because it does really matter. And when you do create new disciplines, eventually they'll become effortless habits, but you have to stick to them. You have to recognize that if something's difficult to do, or if you try to make a new change and it's hard to do, you have to be prepared for that hardness. You have to relish it and realize that actually, the more we tackle things that are difficult, the more we push to do something, the more we use our willpower or tenacity, the more that actually builds a strong sort of muscle. It makes part of our brain, actually, a part of the ACC, the anterior cingulate cortex, actually bigger, and it activates a part of that particular ACC. So what happens when we tackle something that requires our will is it helps us to boost or build our ability to will ourselves to do things. We become more tenacious the more we practice tenacity. And so recognizing that means that the more you discipline yourself and you push yourself to do the things that you promised yourself that you would do, the more likely you are to find it easier And before you know it, you then cultivate habits. You find ways to make it natural, to make it second nature, to build routines, normal, everyday, automatic routines where you start to do what it is that you need to do without even thinking. And lastly, we need to realize that it's important for us to make change a priority. So to make change a priority, what we're talking about is doing whatever it is that you can do to, number one, focus on one specific change at a time. What is it that I need to do in order for me to get the results that I want? So you prioritize one singular change that you're making at this moment. When you prioritize one singular change that you make, it can be transformational. Because if you put all of your mental energy and effort on one specific big change, then you're going to find yourself being able to start to make traction on that and start to find yourself with baby steps moving towards where it is that you want to get to. Whereas if you try to change a million different things, it's like New Year's resolution. There's too many things to keep track of. It's a bit overwhelming and you might never get around to what it is that you need to do. So it's really critical for you to focus on how can you start to make change something that happens for you. And the way to be able to do that is by making it a priority, by remembering your why, by establishing the disciplines that build the kind of habits that you need, by recognizing responsibility leads to control, that you're always changing anyway, so change is always possible, that the status quo or the status quo is not necessarily a comfortable place to live, and staying as you are is actually the riskier thing. And the reason I bring all of that up is that I'm trying to get across the most important mindset for you to develop and cultivate in order for you to make changes work. And once you do that, then the next step is to be able to ask better questions. And there's a number of questions that I think you should always ask before you begin to change something in your life. And so what I want to do is walk you through these questions, and hopefully you'll find this framework particularly helpful. Once again, we'll have everything in the show notes over at donfitzpatrick.com, where you find the podcast. But for now, the first question to ask is, what do you want to change? And you want to be very clear of exactly what change you want to make. What is the new behavior you want? What was the old behavior? It needs to be clear cut. No ambiguity whatsoever. You're not going to say, well, I want to change my lifestyle. What part of your lifestyle specifically? What is the new action that you want to take moving forward? Second of all, why is it important for you to change? You need to have that why. You need to feel that driving you, motivating you. The only reason we'll successfully be motivated, inspired to do something new is if we believe that it's important, is if we have a strong enough why. So what specifically do you want to change? And why does it matter so much? Next, when do you want to change? So when specifically are you going to start this new change? And if you're already planning to start it from now, when specifically have you engaged in the old habit and will now engage in the new habit? Make sure you're describing for yourself the exact situations, the exact times when you are going to engage in this new habit or this new behavior or this new way of thinking or new feeling that you're creating for yourself. Whatever the change is, when are you going to do it? And not just when, but also where. What are the clear situations? Sometimes it's like a case of time. It's not like at 3:00, I'm going to stretch. Maybe it's a case of when this event happens, I'm going to react differently. So maybe instead of reacting the same way you always have when your partner says something, or maybe reacting the same way you always have when someone in work says something, instead you want to change your reaction, right? So that's not necessarily a situation that is time-based, but it's situational based. So when we talk about the question, where, as in what situations will you find yourself changing? In what situations will you make this change happen? And so when you ask yourself the question, in what situations or which situations or where will I start to make this change happen? And when will I make this change happen? Both of those cover the gambit of every single possible scenario where you need to be aware of making the changes occur. And so you ask yourself, what is the specific change you want to make? Why is it so important that you make it? When and where are you going to make this specific change? And then the next is how. So how are you going to change it? Be very clear of exactly what you're going to do and how are you going to make sure that you do it regularly, consistently, and effectively. And when you've answered those questions, you'll find yourself ready with a game plan to execute it effectively when you need to. But there's two other questions I'm going to recommend for you. The first is, what are the obstacles to change? As in, what might stop you from engaging in this? You know what you need to do. You need to know why you need to do it, when and where you need to do it, and how you need to do it. But what might stop you? What are the obstacles that could be in your way, right? What are the temptations that might be down the road? What are the challenges? What people might stand in your way? what events might stand in your way, what circumstances might stand in your way, what environment might stand in your way, what might make this hard. And then the final question is, what are the solutions to these obstacles or challenges? What are you going to do when you face the challenges? What are you going to do when you face the temptation? What are you going to do when you're in those circumstances? When you can make a plan so that you're ready to deal with whatever the obstacles are, and you're ready to be able to overcome those obstacles such that you can execute on what you need to do because you know how to do it, you know why it's important, and you know when and where you're going to do it, that is exactly what's going to allow you to make the changes occur and to make the changes happen long term. Now, it would be remiss in me if I didn't give you some other sort of tips or strategies that will help you to be even more effective in making sure that this change happens and this change lasts. So let me give you a few other suggestions which might be of benefit. One is to focus on the small wins. So as you make changes, don't see it as an on-off sort of process whereby you either change or you don't. See it as something that you're actively doing. You are changing. And the more that you execute the new behavior versus the old behavior, the more you're changing. The less you do that, the less you're changing. And when we think about it in terms of the more I'm changing versus the less, it means that if occasionally you go backtrack or you fall off the wagon, as they call it, or things don't work out the way you want them to, or you revert back to the old behavior, instead of going, oh my goodness, I tried and now I failed, instead you just notice that that's pulled you back a little bit and you need to go straight back forward. And you've certainly made a lot more progress since you began changing. So you've always been changing. Now, even though you've taken a step back, you're still going in the direction of changing. And by recognizing that, it makes it a lot easier for you to set up small wins, so little milestones along the way to suggest that, okay, I've been doing this new behavior for a month, now for 2 months, now for 3 months, now for 4 months. And as you notice the progress you're making, that boosts the level of a chemical in your mind called dopamine, which makes you more motivated. And also it boosts your confidence because it makes you feel more confident that you are in fact different. You have made the change, which is absolutely crucial. The next thing is to keep things simple. Don't try to complicate things by trying to change a million things all at once. Don't make things complicated or difficult or complex. Try to reduce it down and be very clear. What is the specific change you want to make? What are the simple milestones or the small wins that you're going to experience along the journey? What's the timeline look like? Be very clear, be very specific, be very simple. Make it as easy as possible for your brain, and you'll find yourself being able to do it more wonderfully. The third thing to remember is try to make the change simple to do, but not necessarily all too easy. And why I say too easy is you want it to be easy, obviously, but if it's too easy, the danger is we don't value it enough. So give yourself what we call a stretch change goal. In other words, don't give yourself a goal which you know you can easily achieve. Give yourself a goal that you've 90% certainty that you can achieve, something that you have to stretch, that you have to push yourself, that you got to challenge yourself a bit in order to achieve. The reason for this is what allows you to prioritize. This is what allows you to motivate yourself more than ever. This is what allows you to get enough of a drive, keep moving forward, to keep pushing forward, to have that tenacity. When something's too easy, oftentimes we can take it for granted. We can take our foot off the gas or foot off the pedal, and we can forget the importance of what it is that we're trying to pursue, we're trying to do. So it's critical that you avoid this potential pitfall and you give yourself something that challenges you. Next, paint a clear picture of the success and the failure that you're looking at. So imagine how amazing it will be if you are to pull this off, if you're to make the change, when you are to make the change, should I say. And imagine the worst case scenario if you weren't to succeed, how awful that will be. And paint a very clear picture of this is failure and this is how bad it feels. This is success, and this is how amazing it feels. And keep what we call mentally contrasting those two images. The more you do that, research shows, the more likely you are to achieve your goal, or in this case, successfully accomplish the particular change. Two more. One is build routines and habits. Find ways to be able to establish habitual ways of doing things. Try to make everything as effortless as possible and make it part of your daily routine. So figure out any changes you want to make. Try to give yourself as much practice and making it part of the way in which you work. So it's not just something that you're trying hard to do and you're cutting out a specific amount of time for it. Instead, give yourself the opportunity just to make it as automatic and as habitual as you possibly can. Give it time to become part and become incorporated into your everyday routine, the more likely you are to stick with it. And finally, and potentially most importantly, make sure that the changes that you make are part of who you are. Your identity are your beliefs about yourself, who you believe you are. And when you can start to take the new actions that you're taking, the new behaviors you're engaging in, and you can start to see yourself as the kind of person who does that, the kind of person who responds like that, the kind of person who takes those kind of actions, the kind of person that has those kind of habits, the more you see yourself as that kind of person, the more you'll internalize that new way of working. And as a result of that, you'll make change something that you have as a permanent part of the way in which you function. So once again, covered a lot of ground, lots of tips there, but I'd ask you to be very clear of exactly what you want to change, why you want to change it, and make sure that you're ready for this change. I would love to invite you one more time into the Changing Minds monthly membership. This is a membership where every single month I go live for 90 minutes, teaching you about some area of personal or professional development. You can see from the page alanfitzpatrick.com/CMM all of the things that it includes. And it includes more than 100 hours of content available to you on all sorts of topics, including all of the different programs, all of the different schools that I've included in the membership, which are from the Changing Minds store. Once again, you'll be able to see everything at alanfitzpatrick.com/CMM. Would love you to join. Please consider it. But in the meantime, regardless, take care, be well. Really hope you enjoyed this episode. Really hope the force is strong with you, and may you continue to believe better. Take care, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.